At Focus on Liberia, we discuss everything Liberia, from education to politics, arts and culture, entertainment, agriculture, history, religion, family, and technology. Focus on Liberia uncovers and showcases the best of Liberia and shows the world the truth about Liberia. We educate, elevate, and promote all things Liberia. We conduct interviews, panel discussions, debates, and more. Tune in to Focus on Liberia on Facebook and YouTube and be a part of the stories that make up the news.
This is Focus on Liberia, and I am Dennis Jar.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another session of Focus on Liberia. I am your co-host, Gabriel Carter. Today, we have a very special show for you today. So whatever you're doing, just stop it right now. If you're doing whatever you're doing, just stop it. Just tune in, share it, and just get ready for the next hour to an hour and a half for this special discussion we're going to have. Today, I have in the studio with me Jimmy, my co-host, and our guest today is Ambulah Mamey. That's how you say it, right? I hope I didn't butcher that. Perfect. Ambulah, welcome to Focus on Liberia on the Marketplace specifically. As we like to say, we talk everything business, finance, and economics on the show. So I know you guys put out a very detailed report article as refuting the economic data that the World Bank put out. And we're going to be talking about that article that you guys put out today. We'll go in depth to talk about the numbers, why you guys felt the need to really, refute the numbers that the World Bank put out. But before we get started, would you maybe take a minute or two to introduce yourself for our audience today?
Oh yeah, definitely do that. So Ambulah Mamey. I work in international development. I'm an agricultural development specialist, specifically working to design and implement USAID agriculture and food security projects. I have portfolio in Africa, in Ethiopia, in Ghana. So that's a little bit about me. I work with my colleagues, Thomas Kane, who is a public financial management specialist,
Mhm.
and my other colleague, Matthew Nyamplu,
Yeah.
who specializes in human security and economic development.
Perfect.
Thank you.
All right. No, thank you. Thank you for being on the show again. Thank you for coming. Hopefully, we will get the rest of the guys on the show someday. But again, thank you for taking the time to join us. Jimmy.
Okay, let me introduce myself. I am typically an engineer by trade, in telecommunications. I've also worked in power, but my first love was economics. I have a undergrad in mathematics and economics, and so I have also a love for Liberia and wanted to do whatever we can to improve our economic situation.
Yeah.
That's me in a nutshell.
Yeah, Jimmy, thank you. And again, I didn't know you have a background in mathematics. That is heavy duty STEM, man. That's crazy.
Yeah, if you
Wow.
really want to stop crushing the numbers in economics, you're
That's what
going
you
to need
said.
math.
Yeah. Wow. Oh man.
Yeah.
Alrighty. All right, let's just jump right into it. So again, Ambulah, thank you for joining us. And so this show is about the report, you guys put out, the article you guys wrote. But what we want to do is look at what you guys were refuting. So we're going to take a look at the World Bank report that they put out. And then I think you guys read through that and say, no, this is really off. What they're saying here isn't accurate, and this is why we think this isn't accurate. So in the first, let's take a look at what the World Bank put out, the report that the World Bank put out that you guys uh, refuted. All right, and I hope you guys can see my screen here. So okay, maybe voila. Okay, so this is the World Bank report that you guys uh, responded to here. So the World Bank report reads, it said Liberia economy expanded by 4.8% in 2022, despite the global headwind from the war on Ukraine, right? The war on Ukraine, high global inflation, and depressed demand in advanced economies, right? So that is, you know, the headwind that they were talking about, that, challenges. But despite that, we still, according to them, we still had a 4.8% increase. I mean, growth. It said the expansion was driven by mining and agriculture growth in a by mining and agriculture. Growth in the agriculture sector accelerated to 5.9% from 3.3 in 2021 on the back of increased rice production and cassava production, right? And I think this is what your article honing. This is your biggest piece of data that you called out that was inaccurate by them. And they said the industrial output grew by 10.4%, right, in 2022, largely driven by increased gold production. Growth in services slowed to 2.8 from 3% in 2021, reflecting a slowdown in construction services and hospitality. And they said, despite that, the pressure from the global fuel and food prices, inflation remain contained. They talk about the inflation number here. I have a big, uh, uh, you know, fish to fry with them on those inflation number. But let's get to the second part of this, right? Um, so they talk about the government fiscal position, worsening in 2022. The deficit is estimated to have risen to 6.9% of GDP in 2022, up from 2.4 in 2021. This was partly a reflection of the change in IDA lending policy, specifically the decline in grant. So what they're speaking to here is, how we revise our economic data. We recast the budget because of the declining IDA grant that we usually get, that usually supplement our budget. It's a which were accounted for above the line by 2.9% percentage point of GDP, right? They also went down. They said the current account balance. So they have a whole report that we looked at. They talk about the monetary policy here as well. Um, and this is in entirety, this is the article that you guys refuted, right? And so the first question I think that we need to talk about here is, Let me put this up here. Okay, so we talk about the. So talk. Maybe you should talk to us about your article. If you want, I can share it because I have a screen of it as well. I have a screenshot of it. Um,
Yeah, so when we read the World Bank growth report,
yeah.
we were concerned about the factors driving the growth.
Uh-huh.
When we saw agriculture
Right. Go ahead. I'm trying to pull it up.
contributing up
Right.
to 48 or almost 49, almost 50% of the entire growth of the 4.8% growth,
Right.
then it became a point of concern
Right.
to look at the agricultural sector in detail
Mhm.
and see what is happening that agriculture is contributing almost 50%
Mhm.
of the growth in 2022. So that was the red flag. That was what we were interested in. That was motivated, additional research and the publication of the opinion.
Yeah.
So we saw it written clearly in the report that the growth in the agricultural sector was on the back of increased rice and cassava production.
Yep. It did. That's
So
what
we
it said.
decided to check and see where rice and cassava increased, as the report explained.
Right.
The primary source for agriculture data on Liberia globally
Mhm.
is the FAO,
What is the FAO?
the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations.
Okay. Perfect. All right.
So the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations is the primary source of agriculture data on Liberia and other countries across the world,
Right.
especially those countries who do not have their own, agriculture data acquisition process like the US.
Mhm.
So, and the report in itself referenced the FAO. But when we checked the FAO, we realized that the FAO did not have data for 2022.
Mhm.
But the report of the World Bank said rice and cassava production in 2022 increased, I think, by 54 and 48% respectively.
Yeah.
FAO doesn't have output data
Yeah.
for rice and cassava production in Liberia for 2022.
Right.
So that necessitated additional inquiry into where the World Bank took the number from.
Uh-huh.
We realized that the World Bank took the number from a forecast that FAO did in 2021.
Mhm.
And FAO were forecasting that by 2022, rice and cassava production will be at the number the World Bank were referencing. And then we found that to be problematic. GDP as we know it calculates output, what has been done, what has been achieved over the year. That's what GDP captures. That's why it calculates.
Right.
It doesn't calculate what is expected to be done.
Right.
So that was the foundation of our concern with the report.
Right.
And we established that, yes, the FAO had a forecast, but they were not actual numbers. And
They were
you cannot
optimistic.
use, and we felt that it was intolerable
Right.
to use a forecast and not an actual number to calculate the GDP of a country.
Right.
Because there are implications when you do that.
Right.
And if, because of maybe lack of data or other reasons, if you do that, the standard is you must explicitly write in the report, not in a footnote. You must explicitly write in the report that this growth figure is an estimate or a forecast.
Okay.
The World Bank report doesn't say so and doesn't even have a footnote that is a forecast. So that's why we said we investigate further. So we engage the bank directly. And that's the reason why it took time for us to come up what we came up with. We engaged the bank directly on the issue. They responded to us on the basis for using the data points they used to come up with a report.
Mhm.
The highlights of their response was they can always review their growth data, and that as new data become available, they will update appropriately. So that was the response. So our issue is, suppose data doesn't come up, or the data are not available up to 2026.
Right.
You have already announced that the economy have grown by 4.8%.
Right.
It could have implication,
Yes.
and we can talk about that later.
Perfect. Jimmy, you're muted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Very interesting, Amila. And let me ask you a question though. As you correctly said, they depend on the FAO data and analysis to come up with their report. Have you seen any report from the FAO directly that is similar, using only projected data and not real data?
I have not seen report from the FAO using forecasts without being explicit about the use of forecasts. I have a time to work with the FAO on a project. I led their agriculture for nutrition program in Ghana. I'm also doing one currently on agriculture and gender equality and social inclusion in the same Ghana. So when we do these reports, because especially in developing countries, to be honest, quality data, real-time data is difficult to acquire.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're communicating report of that nature, it is only fair to your readers, to the audience, people who use those reports to make business decisions, people who use those reports to make investment decisions, to be clear about the level of quality of the data you use, so they can make informed decisions on how to proceed. So to answer your question, yes, I have seen reports where forecasts used, but they are explicitly written that the numbers are forecast, unlike what we saw with this report.
Perfect. And I think there's, when you read the report that they put out, there is a lot of, as I said, I agree with you guys. So this is why when I saw this, I said we got to talk to these guys and see what was their motivation for uh refuting, putting out a rebuttal to the data that the World Bank puts out. I don't, you know, I have my own problem with the World Bank because it's exactly what you guys did. I believe they have not a good understanding of these developing countries. Some of them sit in these ivory towers and just put out economic data about a country without even understanding the 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 social fabric of the country, the economy itself. So, and the thing about us in these developing country or emerging, if you want to call it frontier market, when they puts out these numbers, we jump on them as if this is the Bible that we just published on, on Liberia. We take them as face value without doing too much dive into the numbers like you guys did to say, okay, are these, in as much that they're putting out these growth prospects and numbers, are these numbers accurate? Where are they getting the data? What are the source of the data? So that's my biggest problem with them, right? So when they put out this stuff and you guys responded to them that these numbers are inaccurate, I said, these guys are bold. This is bold, and this is about time that we need to start doing that, right? But my biggest question, when you guys reach out to them, they did give you any insight in terms of, okay, this was wrong, this was projection, maybe we'll recount that article and put boldly in there that these were actually taken, from projections as opposed to these numbers coming from accurate data? Did they give you any indication of doing that?
Uh, what I want to see is, you know, everybody may have their personal experiences with different reports, from multinational organizations like the World Bank. For this report, I know the authors
Okay.
of the report. They are based in Liberia. Some of them I have personal conversation and interaction with. I respect them to be, bread scholars. They are not one of those you can easily dismiss when it comes to the things they do, right? So I just wanted to establish that I know the authors, I know their strength, very respected colleagues who produced the report. I just wanted to make that clear. Regarding your question of getting response from them, yes, we got response from them. Like I said, the response was the World Bank usually review its macroeconomic framework, and as data become available, macroeconomic framework is updated to reflect new data. That was the response to one of the questions we asked. There were several questions in the email, in the communication we exchanged. We wouldn't want to go in those details, but since you asked about the response, yes, that was the response we received. But we felt that response in itself was the reason to write the article that we wrote.
Right.
Because you are waiting for output data. You are in 2023, but you are waiting for output data from 2022 to speak about the growth of the economy of Liberia in 2022. So we feel that in itself is a good reason, to raise the red flag, that you're still waiting for output data for 2022, but your report on the growth of the country is already published and being used by business people, by policy makers to inform the decisions they're making.
Okay, Jimmy.
Yeah, I'm glad you're pointing this out, because the World Bank report informs the UN and the big partners like the EU, the United States, and also the Liberian government. So my next question would be: have you approached the Minister of Agriculture to ask, do they have current data on these things, so as we can actually know how our economy is being impacted by these investments?
So I will answer that question, but first let me just say, besides the World Bank and these big organizations using these reports and these figures, the ordinary people on the ground use it.
Yeah.
And it is important to know that. You see, sometimes in Liberia, when you come out with a report, and ordinary people say, you see the country growing, but we're still suffering. You hear that often.
Yep.
Or you say, things are going good in your report, but on the ground, things are not going good. It's not because those reports are just written recklessly. No, it is because the empirical foundation, the data used to generate the report in itself is not accurate, doesn't reflect what's happening on the ground. That's the reason why when the report comes up, the people cannot easily accept the report. So sometimes when you're talking to them about World Bank report, talking to them about, different organizations, people say, I don't want to hear about that report. So part of what we're trying to do is how can we make the people we're working for to have confidence in what we produce as development practitioners, right? And the way to do that is to be able to build strongly on data acquisition. So to your question, I don't think the Ministry of Agriculture has the capacity and the resources to acquire accurate data and store it. I don't think so. And the reason why I don't think so is because you go on their website, like, you want agriculture data, you go on the USDA website. That's where I get, most of my data from when I'm doing work for the US related projects. So you go on USDA, United States Department of Agriculture, you find data because they've invested significantly in the structure, in the acquisition, in the validation process of the data. Liberia, you don't find it. You don't even find recent update of activities. Some of the updates there as far back as 2019 or 2018. So I doubt they have data. I didn't find data with them. So most of the time when we're doing work for Liberia, we rely on FAO, which is, has an office in Liberia, and they work to be able to generate data, or the LAGES. Unfortunately, I think the latest data the LAGES has is from 2014 or 20 on agriculture production. So yeah, in itself, if you go down in the article, we have some strong recommendations on how we can address these issues, and then it boils down to how government can invest a lot more into acquiring data to inform policy making. So the ministry doesn't have one.
And you, as an economic technician, that's how, like, because you guys would get into the details. You make sure, like a mechanic, you make sure the car is running properly. And you being the technicians, and you realize money could be going into to these areas, and we're not getting the yield, the output we're looking for. So then you guys can design a more inclusive or enhanced plan so that we will gain that advantage, and that is what I guess everybody looking forward to you guys telling us, look, this millions of dollars you put in there, it did not yield the kind of growth we needed. We need to do something a little different so we can get the growth we need. Are you guys, is that a purpose, sole purpose? Is that the purpose you guys coming up with this new report so that we can make surgical adjustments to how we invest in this critical area of agriculture?
So the report itself will just focus on how we're trying to show the need for government and its partner to see reason to invest into data acquisition, analysis, and management, and how critical data is to informing decision, to monitoring implementation, to evaluating progress, how critical it is. So this report and the lack of confidence in the numbers used was just an example to show how, when there is no data, the repercussions, the implications of no data, how does it affect the country? So we want to use this report as an example to shed light on the need for government and its partner to invest into data.
Exactly.
But to your question about how do we improve this, the article didn't cover that, but we can speak more about that maybe at a later time. I personally have written 2, 3, 4, 5 different articles on how we can improve agriculture in Liberia, right? So that could be a topic for another time. Today's topic, is just focused on the need for government to invest in data
collection,
and how this report sheds light on that.
Yeah. So thank you. The question that I have, how have previous report impacted the country, or being received by the government? Has there been any report previously of something similar from the World Bank that will negatively, that you guys were aware of, that negatively put out negative number and we did not catch it, but actually had a negative impact on the country? Are you aware of any reports at all?
Yeah, let me say this. Most of the time when the reports come up, it's used mostly by politicians to explain their narrative, and I don't want to go into the details of that. If there is a report that says agriculture grows or the economy grows, those who that report favor, run with the narrative.
Right.
That's the beginning and the end most of the time of the report. We now decided to say, let's go one step forward. Going forward, let's look at the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Let's follow the events, the investments, or the different programs that are underlying those numbers. So we now want to share light on that going forward. To your question, I can't pinpoint to a specific report, but this is what I can say. We have invested as a country, at least in the last time I checked, in my last article I released, we have spent close to $1 billion through donor funding, NGOs operation on agriculture between 2017 and 2021. The different projects, over 500 million. Most of these projects are directed to addressing food insecurity, increasing rice production, increasing household income. But when you match the funding to the outcome, we are inherently food insecure.
Yeah.
Just last month, or July, not last month, July, Liberia was listed, and it still remains one of the countries in need of emergency food insecurity, or in need of emergency food distribution, as if we are in war. July, and we stay on the list of countries in need of emergency food distribution after spending over 500, 600, 700 millions of dollars to make this one small country food secure. So the reason why some of those interventions are not working, to your question, the reason why most of those interventions are not working the way they should work is because they are not designed on the foundation of empirical evidence.
Mm-hmm.
They are not implemented using rigorous analysis of data to inform implementation.
Mm-hmm.
When those projects and programs, end in the different places, they are not properly evaluated to determine what worked and what did not work. So as a result, you see people keep repeating one thing over and over and not getting the results we desire, because the underlying data that inform those implementation, the underlying data that monitor those implementation, the underlying data that evaluated those implementation are not rigorous. They are quack data. They're not strong enough. So I can't point to a specific report, but I can point to that scenario to tell you how previous reports have not helped us in terms of informing the way we proceed with development intervention in the country.
Right. And I do agree with you. And I think sometimes maybe you guys did, but you're supposed to bring in the Minister of Agriculture on this, especially with the MDB putting out accurate data that is informing policy at their level. And when you guys wrote that report, maybe in as much that you went to the World Bank, you're supposed to go to the Ministry of Agriculture to say, hey, are you aware of this? Did these people consult you before putting out these data? Are you aware of this article? What is your take on it? Because as you rightly stated, these data that they put out inform the revenue allocation that goes to the Ministry of Agriculture in terms of he or she carrying out her duties to make the country food secure. But if the data, as you stated, is wrong, and as a consequence of that, he or she is getting, a certain portion of the revenue allocated to her to do her work. When you guys call that, I think, you're supposed to get he or she involved to really bring that to her attention. Hey, maybe you need to, in addition to what the World Bank is putting out too, you need to really invest in data mining and data sourcing to be able to track the country agriculture progress as well. Maybe I'd have you guys, consulted the Ministry of Agriculture at all.
I definitely agree with you.
Right.
I definitely agree. We need to engage the relevant stakeholders, especially the Ministry of Agriculture, on this issue. And probably it would be I will share the article with them. But one thing I did when we were writing the article was to reach out to them to inquire, because one of the issues we raised in the article was that if agriculture is growing at this pace,
Hmm.
and if agriculture is contributing up to 50, close to 50% of the entire growth of the country,
Right.
what are the underlying policies? What are the underlying programs that is pushing agriculture at this rate? So we know them.
Right.
So that's how that was the only way that was the only reason we engaged the Ministry of Agriculture. They
Right.
share with us a report of different interventions done in 2001 and 2002. But the evaluation of some of those of the interventions they provided to us, the evaluation itself is not showing that there's significant progress. The evaluation itself of the interventions they did, especially during the Ebola time, the things they were distributing, the places they were are not places you can point to for growth in rice and cassava. So that was our engagement with them. We can continue to do. There is always room for
Improvement.
engaging these people and improving on some of the things we do. But then
Right.
it boils down to how do they see it? Do they see it as something worth their time to look into? I don't want to guess and say yes or no, but given past experience of my personal engagement with stakeholders in that sector, because that's where I work,
Hmm.
I'm not very optimistic that they will see it as something meaningful to be involved with. So we can speak broadly to the bank,
Hmm.
we can speak broadly to the government and say this is a problem. This thing with the agriculture data is just one in a million, right?
Hmm.
So, but we're telling you that there are implications. For example, in the case, you're projecting a significant increase in rice and cassava production. It sends a wrong signal on the ground that we are doing the right thing. It sends a wrong signal on the ground to those working in that sector that they are actually performing.
Right.
And if the data comes back and it shows that we did not meet those projections, you have already created some level of complacency in those who working in those areas.
Hmm.
So we can speak broadly to the bank, we can speak broadly to the government to share the light on the need to continue to invest, to increase investment and prioritize the need to collect data,
Yeah.
use data to inform policy decisions.
Okay. So, and I would, Jimmy, let me just ask this. I don't know if it's a question or a statement.
Go ahead.
So I will. I agree with you, but as I said before, I too have uh, a whole qualm with their inflation data and the way they calculate inflation in the country. Um, so the broader question become, or I don't know if it's a question. So the way we should look at it is, if they are making that kind of error on growth numbers from an agricultural standpoint, what other mistakes that we haven't caught on to in terms of every year they put out these growth numbers? I don't know how they get them out. Now, to their point, to play devil advocate here, right? From you work in economics, I work in finance, right? You do make projections, right?
So
Projections are made all the time. If you don't have data for this year, you can use the previous years to make projection for this year and the maybe 2 3 years ahead, right? So I do agree with them that you can make data, but also, as you stated, yes, it has to be explicitly stated that these were based on projection and inaccuracy, right? I mean, and not actual data. But if they are putting out numbers like that without ever saying, now, to their point too, it may not be broadly how the entire World Bank runs, their, models and data and puts out data. It could just be, hey, these guys that were just operating in Liberia, but they represent the bank. So if they put out data that are inaccurate, we attribute that inaccuracy to the bank in general, right? So if they are putting out data that are inaccurate in terms of informing policy decision, that means what's going to be happening going forward, we're going to be having to we have to scrutinize every number they put out on the country now because of that, just because of this report. Now, every time they put out economic data, either in agriculture or broadly, we have to now look at those numbers and actually look at the data integrity and the source of the numbers that they're putting out, just because of that, right? So, but in their defense, I know you do make, whether your economics or finance or whatever, you do make projection if you don't have accurate data. So I just wanted to state that as well.
Yeah, me too. Agree with you 100%. There's absolutely no problem with using forecasts because you don't have data to inform decision or to come up with numbers. There's absolutely no problem. The only thing is, if you see in our article, we emphasize the need for transparency in doing that.
Right.
You want to be explicit. You want people to know. You want to show the limitation of the growth figure you announce. We're announcing this 4.8 growth figure under the condition that almost 50% of this figure is a forecast. You see what I mean? So you want to be transparent. There's absolutely no problem. To your point, that is the culture we want to create.
Exactly.
The culture of saying, yes, there is a report on our country. We as professionals, we know we're working with basic, but we have time. Let's look at it together. Let's look for somebody who's working in different areas. Let's come together and look at it and see whether it makes sense, whether it represents, what we know it should represent. That's the culture we want to create. Prior to this thing we did, I'm not aware of any other critique, professional critique, not political critique. I'm not aware of any professional critique of this nature or any report on Liberia. Most of the time when these reports come up, like I said, politicians use it to run their narrative depending on how the report are structured. Once they get 2 headlines in the newspapers and they talk about it, that's done. We want to create, me and my 2 other authors, Matthew and Thomas, trying to drive this new process around professionals on how we can start to hold these people accountable and say, okay, gentlemen, you're doing good for our country, but try to look at this in the way and try to look at this in the other way. That's what we want to do.
Perfect.
But Ambulah, I'd like to submit something here. I mean, we've done regression analysis. I mean, forecasting using regression analysis, other analytical methods. And it's all depends on the data. Because if you don't have those proper data points, even your forecasting is going to be wrong. You have to have sufficient data so that the curve you come up with using your analytical tools like regression is more accurate. But if you have a lot of missing data points, it's not going to be accurate at all, even your forecast. So the lacking of data is really crucial, and because of that, I would challenge the writers of this report on the accuracy of their forecasts, not the real data, but how accurate is your forecast? What is the basis of your the data that you used? Was it scanty data? Okay, missing several different points, or was it based on some detailed data that you acquired on the ground? So, I mean, that will be the only fair thing, because it's one thing having the real values, but you cannot project unless you have good data as well.
Sure.
And tell you the truth, today data is king. You and I know we were all data is king right now.
Yeah, that is gold.
We,
Yep, they
we
know
use
gold.
data to anticipate. I mean, even for networks, for markets, for everything.
Yeah,
You know, and that's why you see this proliferation of data centers because data. Then you go to machine learning, then you go into AI.
yeah,
You know that we can have um, systems process this data all by itself and come up with logical solutions or suggestions. So I would challenge them. How close do you stand by your forecast? Not the actual data, but even your forecast. How well how much do you stand by it? You know, and you have already showed them, and all people who do statistics and all these kind of analysis know that you don't have enough data. You shouldn't be projecting any forecasts if you don't have the data for it.
yeah.
You know, so on that part, it's misleading.
It is.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, we are approaching the hour mark, but I have a question for you, which will, drive us into your part of the report that you guys wrote. Um, so, what what specifically were your counterpoints in terms of with the numbers, that the World Bank puts out, and I think somewhere in your report you guys did a good job in terms of highlighting that. And hold on, let me bring this up so hopefully you can get us through that as well. Um, you can stop me here if I get there. Okay, this is your. I think is okay. So this is where you guys. Um, this is I think the meats and bound and the creme de la cream of the report that you guys put out here. Um, do you want to speak to that in terms of going over the counterpoint that you guys made to the World Bank here?
Let me see.
You can read it. I know it's kind of very. All right, so it says I can read it for you. Hopefully, maybe you can capture some point on there as well. It said our overview to the FAO's data bank found no evidence that rice and cassava production respectively increased in Liberia. Official agriculture data on Liberia are normally released by the FAO, but the institution does not have 2022 output data for rice and cassava production in Liberia. There is, however, FAO, an FAO forecast which was optimistic that cassava production would increase by 54,992 tons, or 15% above the 5 year average, and rice production will increase by 32,000 tons, or 13% in 2022 compared to 2021. The World Bank relies on forecasts, not output data for cassava and rice, to announce 5.9% agricultural growth and 2.3% percentage point contribution of agriculture to Liberia real GDP render the report 4.8% real GDP inaccurate, right? That is the okay. And in conclusion, here you guys said the real economic growth figures are not mere numbers, and I think you may have alluded to this earlier. Are
Hmm.
not mere numbers on paper. They provide the blueprint in strategic planning, policy formulation, investment decision, and more expensive development undertaking that can jumpstart national progress. But they do so only if they are informed by credible data and rigorous analysis. When they lack rigor and have significant data limitation, they can present misleading pictures, lead to erroneous prioritization, misguide national priorities, and potentially undermine progress and adversely impact livelihood. So that is I think the first one here is
Yeah.
the counterpoint, and this is what you guys think can
As
happen once you have inaccurate data.
Yeah.
You're right.
So for the counterpoint, we also, because at the end of the counterpoint, we try to avoid a lot of questions,
Mm-hmm.
because this is an academic work. If you say 4.8 is not accurate, it is expected of you to say what is accurate.
That
Yeah.
was one of the questions. Right. Right.
Yes.
Right.
So if they say if you come and say, okay, World Bank announced 4.8, you are saying 4.8 is not accurate. Then
So
what
what
is
do you think is
accurate?
accurate? Right.
So that is, an honest question to ask somebody who is critiquing the report.
Mm-hmm.
So what we did was we realized we anticipated that question, but we cannot calculate an accurate growth of the economy in the absence of data.
Right.
And we don't want to do the same thing the World Bank did. The World Bank announced the growth with a forecast.
Right.
So one of the authors of the report, Matthew, had asked about them, Ambulah, let's go back to the forecast and see whether in fact the forecast is accurate. And if it is not accurate, we can see whether we can find accurate ways to project, to design our own framework and announce our own numbers. I say it will be difficult to do that. The reason why you don't want to do that is the crux of the argument is reliance on forecasts of a year gone before to announce growth in 2022 is intolerable. Right?
Right.
So you don't want to repeat what they did in your criticism of what they did. So that's the reason why we didn't come up with an alternative number, because we don't have the data to do that. If we had the data to do it, we would have come up with alternative numbers. It is possible that our alternative number could be 5.0 growth. That is if cassava and rice even produced in a quantity or even more than what was what the forecast shows. It is possible it could be more, it is possible it could be less. But we couldn't come up with an alternative number because we did not have the data to do that.
Right.
So the implications we spoke about, yes, if if the foundation of the data, if the foundation of the group you announce, because the agricultural sector, according to them, is 2.3 percentage point of the 4.8.
Mm-hmm.
So that's almost half.
Yeah.
So it's almost half of your growth is questionable.
Yeah.
Then the entire growth itself is questionable. That was our conclusion.
Yeah. So and I think you kind of preempt my follow-up question by answering, because that was the next question I was gonna ask you guys, that hey, if you are saying that these numbers are not accurate because they were given based on projections, what then would you say are the accurate numbers based on whatever regression or model you ran to come out with a data? But I think you, as I said, you preempt that and actually answer that you didn't want to, because you didn't have data. You don't want to repeat what the World Bank did and put out data and put out numbers that might be inaccurate as well, and you'll end up repeating the same thing that they did. But that was the biggest question that I think I have for you guys. If you said this number is inaccurate based on what the World Bank did based on projection, then what did your model or regression that you ran tells you should be the accurate data that should be put out? And if not, were you able to get the accurate data that they were missing? Did you go back to the FAO to get the 2022 numbers, which would then in fact inform your model to give an accurate projection of the current year? But I think you preempt that to answer the question. So
Sure.
Yeah. Jimmy.
Yeah. So one aspect of you pointed out clearly that data is very much required for us to make the proper adjustments, for us to make the progress we want to see in our beloved country. And also policy, it has been suggested that good policies also are very, very key, very strategic in doing that. And speaking on that, I was reading this report on from The Economist, on why are some African countries improving and others not.
Hmm.
You you find this very surprising. The first example they gave was Burundi and Rwanda.
Uh-huh.
Okay, okay, both are small, landlocked, and densely populated countries.
Hmm.
But since independence, both saw genocides against the Hutu, the Tutsi minorities. Okay, so in the early 1990s, Burundi was almost twice as rich as Rwanda, twice as rich. Yet since then, the incomes in Rwanda have increased more than 3 times.
Hmm.
Those in Burundi have fallen. And one big difference between the two is governance. Although neither country is democratic, as you know, both of them are pretty much dictatorships. Um, Rwanda has a functional government and low corruption. The Mo Ibrahim Foundation, which promotes democracy, ranks Rwanda as eighth in Africa in the index of governance. Okay, which also looks at indicators like the rule of law, infrastructure, and sanitation. So, where I'm going with this is, um, as much we can do in investing in agriculture sector, in education, we also we also see that if we do not curb, if we don't have good governance, okay, if we have a good bureaucracy, we will just be running chasing our tails. It is actually absolutely important that we have our institutions run well, because without that we can't go anywhere.
Yeah.
You know, it's essential,
Yeah.
and we can't just look. So government, all the you look at the ministries and people look at it as a place for jobs. These institutions are more than just jobs. They are the ones that keep the entire economy afloat. They're the ones who making the adjustments. They're the ones who that are coming up with solutions and by providing services. If we do not take a strong look at our institutions to improve them where they'll be meet the standard, we are, no matter what we do, it's not going to be yield the benefit we're looking for.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. And there is something that Ambulah actually said. I kind of felt not taken aback, kind of squeamish about it. He
Mhm.
said that because I asked him why is it you didn't reach out to the agriculture minister, and he said, you know, they went to the World Bank because there's not a there's if they had gone to the agriculture minister, they don't feel that there would have been any kind of uh, substance response from them in terms of taking action on that report, which is scary. Which is, you know, this is what like as a minister or somebody who works in government, your goal is to not just do your work, but also look for way to improve. So if somebody come out to you and say this is not accurate, this is supported by data that we looked at. I mean, I think it's incumbent upon you, or it should be incumbent upon you to actually pay attention to say, okay, where did you get this data? They should be inquiring to you. Where did you guys get this data? How long did you guys find out? What do you guys think we can do to make. But the fact that you said if you had gone to them, they wouldn't have, that there's kind of reluctancy there in terms of, that is a scary. That's the scary part about the whole thing here, because I think they should have been your first go-to place. Like, hey, we found this thing out. We ran the data. You are the agriculture minister. You should be taking a look at this. Take a look at this. Whatever question you have, get back to us, and we will dig deeper and give you more. But the fact that you actually, you know, you know, haven't gone to them yet, and if you felt the need that if you had gone with them to them, they wouldn't have. been on board with you, or there would have been a little bit of reluctancy. That is, I think, is a tragedy within itself. But again, that's which is what Jimmy was actually saying, that the kind of government we have is not one that is looking to improve. That it should be one that's looking to improve, but in reality there's this kind of rebuttal or pushback that you get from people that's supposed to be um, uh, you know doing their job. But that's all I wanted to say. I think we have several comments in the chat here. We can jump into them. Maybe you guys can respond to some of them, and then we can look to wrapping up here. I think we're on the hour mark. If you guys don't have um, you guys have,
I,
Jimmy, do you
I
have
like I like
questions?
one of those comments from Mariette Gia.
Yeah,
Gia.
yeah. Okay, let me
She
find it.
said,
Okay.
there it
So,
is.
Liberia talk with no progress. Liberians talk and talk with no progress.
I like Ambulah to take a stab at that one.
Right. There
What you
you
I
got
go,
to say to
Ambulah.
her?
I definitely agree with her.
Right.
I don't disagree. I agree. We talk a lot, no progress. And part of the reason why we are talking and no progress is because most of the talking we are talking are not grounded in evidence.
Mm,
So, how are we talking? What are we talking? That's the direction we need to pay more attention to now, rather than just talking. What are you saying? How can you defend what you're saying? Where is the source of your strength?
mhm.
Where is backing your opinion on this issue? That's where we should take the conversation going.
Yeah.
And for that to happen, you need to have conscious society. You need to have, you know, I mean, it's a tough word to call, but yeah, you need to have a conscious society, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
To be able to do what we need to do.
Yeah.
So if you want to talk about growth in agriculture, it comes back to what we said. You need data to point to.
Mhm.
And the way we see the use of data to evaluate progress, most of the time, what is missing is, and I can always tell people I work with, when I'm pushing you to come out with evidence, it's not necessary to hold you responsible for failure. I want to see what did not work so we can improve on it. But the mindset that when you ask for data to show whether we made progress or not is to hold somebody accountable. It is that mindset that sometimes even holding people from releasing data that they have. It comes to the
Mm-hmm.
level of audit. People only
Mm-hmm.
see audit as a mechanism to hold somebody accountable for fraud.
Mhm.
No, we need to change the mindset. Sometimes we conduct audit
Mm-hmm.
not necessary to hold you for fraud, but to establish what did not work, how can
Mm-hmm.
we improve on it going forward. That's where we need to get our people. That's where we need to get policymakers. That when people are asking for data, when people are conducting audits, when people are doing reviews, they're not only intended to fault you, to say you are wrong. It's also intended to understand what did not work. How can we improve on it? So let's get our people to that point of seeing the request for data, audit, review, not only to hold people say you are at fault, but also to establish what did not work and how can we improve it.
Yeah.
Excellent. And also, to add to that, it establishes benchmarks.
Mhm.
Thank
Now
you.
you know where you are today, so that tomorrow, if you're going down or going up, you will know.
Yep.
Thank you.
And then that is why when the CDC took over the the power, they definitely should have audited the
Previous
UP.
administration. Right.
They should have done an audit. It is
Yeah.
not to grab anybody.
Right.
Correct.
It's not to grab. It's a professional way of establishing your benchmark.
Yeah.
Then you know what you're doing. You know what you have. You know what you don't have. So just going into that without an audit, it's putting it's unprofessional, first of all, and it also doesn't give you uh, uh um a direction of where you should go immediately. And I don't like I said, if we're really conscious about moving, it's not going to happen by by guesswork. It has to be a scientific analysis of what we need to do. Okay, and if we're not going to engage in that, then we know it's just an exercise in futility.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the message. What's her name? That's the message. We can't just keep doing the same
Yeah.
thing
Yeah.
and not doing it professionally and scientifically. And it's not to point to anybody, but it's just to get on the road that we need to be on. That's the main thing.
Yeah. What's her name? Mary, is that Mary Dia? Is that how you say it? Forgive
Mary,
me.
yeah,
Hopefully
I
you're
think.
listening. Hopefully you got the two responses that
Mhm,
were just made. Again, thank you for your comment. And
mhm.
the next one here is Pivo Edison. Edison is an avid follower. Dr. Pivo, thank you for following. So he said, in growth, if growth in agriculture was 5.9%, then let us check the prices of food items. Huh? Is there any food inflation? Huh? That's a great question. I think they may have alluded to that there was food inflation, right?
Yeah, in the
s-
report, in the World
yeah,
Bank report,
yeah, yeah, it did.
there's food
So,
inflation.
so it does that refute their own argument then?
I wouldn't say so, and that's the reason why we didn't go into that on the paper.
Right,
In the paper we release, we thought about this because when you're calculating agricultural growth,
right,
there are different output levels you can use to determine
right.
the strength of the growth. Agricultural employment is one, food security school is one,
Hmm.
agricultural employment is one, food security food school is one, and rural household income is another one. But
Right.
you wouldn't want to go into that because of two reasons. One, the growth that they mention in agriculture is a production growth,
Okay.
crop production.
Production.
It is possible that food produced cannot get to market and could go to spoil because of row factor. You understand me?
Okay.
You can produce a cassava, you produce the rice, you produce the quantity. You because what it did is you just produce a quantity and then you put price to that quantity. But for that quantity to be able to increase food consumption score or decrease food insecurity, it must be able to get to consumer household to the people
Mhm.
able to eat. Now,
But yeah.
if you don't have storage facilities and the cassava
Mhm.
get rotten, then you can't easily say the cassava will not produce because it got rotten.
But so that's the correlation, and as we always know, that correlation does not equate to causality, right? That's like you said, that's the correlation there. That when you're looking at agricultural growth, those are the things that you're looking at. But you cannot say that leap of a growth number they put out, that we can assume now that every food that they produce or that they produce were constrained by factors that may have limited them from getting to the market. So if we have food inflation, but you're saying agriculture, it should have been a little bit of ease on the inflation food data. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, if you are saying that we have that much of a growth in the agriculture sector, the impact on the inflation on food, like they mentioned in their report, shouldn't have been that much higher. That's what I'm trying to say. Yes, there's those limiting factors that, hey, you can grow a whole rice farm here, but the road to get it to Morovia to sell it, or Kakata, or these others, you know, suburban, I mean, urban area to sell it, may not be there. That I absolutely understand that. But then again, that's you can't say that is true for every food crop or agricultural produce that were produced in the country. So that's the reason why I said that this actually, could be, even not from a quantitative standpoint, but from a qualitative standpoint, as to, hey, if you're saying that you know agricultural growth is to this percentage, but you're saying that food inflation is high as well. That's, from a qualitative standpoint, there's a little bit of a uh, you know
So we
difference
knew
there.
we
Right.
knew we knew who we're dealing with. We knew the authors of the report. We know
Right.
their strength. We know the institution we're dealing with. So we wanted to stick to something that we have control over.
Right. Right.
So if you start to go into
You cast a
production,
wide net. Right.
yeah, you catch a wide net production leading into reduction of food insecurity scope. There are a lot of other underlying factors that affect food security scope beyond production numbers, right?
Right. Right.
So you don't want to get into that and using it as a basis to question the report. Because if you get into that and want to use it as a basis to question the report, the author could come by and tell you, say, no, production in itself doesn't lead to consumption.
Mhm.
Food can be available, people cannot consume because of several underlying factors. So
Mhm.
because food insecure, because there's high level of food insecurity, doesn't mean the farm did not produce. Doesn't mean there was not high yield. You understand me? So we thought to stick to what we had control over, specifically to highlight the need for investment into data acquisition,
Right.
Yes.
data analysis, data management, and using data to inform policy making, implementation, and evaluation. That
Without
was
a
the
doubt.
goal. That was the
Yeah.
objective of the article. We only
Yeah.
use the growth number as an example to say what we highlighting the need for government to invest in data. Here is an example. Your growth number they provided to you is inaccurate because of no data.
Because of no data. Okay. Perfect. All right. So Jimmy, anything on that?
Yeah, one of the statistics mentioned in the World Bank report was that there was a growth in gold production
Yes.
that helped to boost growth.
Yep.
So my query is, how did they? What did they use to come up with that number? You know,
That's a good question.
did they go? Did they go to the concessions? Did they go to the Ministry of Mines? Where they how they accumulated that data, and more so, if more gold is being produced, what are the companies involved? If we're really getting into the thick of this, what are the companies involved? What all they taking besides gold? All of a sudden, gold just increase.
Exactly.
I'm concerned now. What
Yeah.
are they doing? We may be seeing just the tip of the iceberg. You
Yeah.
know,
So the
Did
mining
you-
engineers, we can get some professional mining engineers to go into the gold issue. We wanted to stick to the agricultural issues,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I plan on bringing one on next week.
Okay.
Dr. Kamamoba.
Okay.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to
Yeah.
bring him on. We're going to be talking about that mining industry next week. You're welcome to come, mommy.
Okay, no
Anything.
problem.
Yeah, yeah,
You got my number already. We can
right.
always,
Yeah. We'll send you the link. Or yeah. Well.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Always talk about it.
Yeah. That's you read that report. It kind of your mind go in different direction. You just want to take every piece apart and compartmentalize it and take it apart. But as you said, you guys just focus on the agriculture piece of it and the data. This is another statement from Dr. Paivo again. He says service sector has lagged behind for so long since the middle of the last century. We need the airlines and shipping lines back instead of road due to the heavy rain. Why don't we look at the railroad service? Good luck trying to build a railroad service. We need more telecommunication system. We need more investors in quality education and healthcare services. These will make up for the declining extractive industrial sector. Whoa. Any thoughts?
Um, I saw that myself, a decline in the service sector.
Mhm.
When you have a decline in services, you're talking about fewer people having jobs.
Yeah,
You know, and that is
that's the
one of
easiest
the
sector
work
to create job in, right? So if you're declining, right?
right, and if that is impactful for the livelihood of people. You know, so I felt disheartened because they may be taking your minerals out and you have growth, But your services, people don't have fewer jobs.
Mhm.
People have fewer work, fewer things, fewer business activity going on in the country because services can be interpreted as various business activities, restaurants and all that other sort of thing, and that is going down.
Yeah.
So that concerned me. Mamey, I don't know. What do you think about that area?
The way we see, economic transformation over the last 4, 5, 6 decades, there's a pattern, and that pattern is agriculture for poor country will always constitute more than 30 to 45% of the economy. The
Mhm,
service sector will not be strong enough for poor countries. The service
mhm,
sector will not be strong enough for poor countries. When agriculture transforms from just production to value addition along the chain, then the contribution to agriculture declines, and then the contribution of the service sector picks up. So that's how it works. Normally, underdeveloped countries will see agriculture sector contributing more to GDP, agriculture sector contributing more to employment, but gradually when the production of agriculture moves through the value chain with different value addition, then service sector began to pick up, agriculture sector continue to go, agriculture sector begin to go down.
Mhm.
So for poor countries like in the US, therefore rich countries in the US, you see that the service sector dominates the economy. Agriculture is just contributing minimum to the US
Mhm.
economy compared to the service sector. But
Mhm.
check America 250 years back, you see that agriculture was dominating and the service sector was low. So for Liberia, it is surprising to me to see that the service sector is now booming. It's not surprising to me because that's the trend we've seen in economic transformation over the last 4, 5, 6 decades. What we need to do now is, and to be able to jumpstart that process of making the service sector to grow the way we want it to grow, is that our agriculture should not just be focused on small scale agriculture for subsistence purposes. Our
mhm,
agriculture sector should not just be focused on export led agriculture. Most of what we're doing, even the government's policy on agriculture, is prioritizing cocoa for export purposes. It's written there clearly. Prioritizing cocoa for export purposes. Yes, in the initial stages, you can do that. But if you want your service sector to grow, if you want to get the full benefit from agriculture, you need to add value.
mhm,
You need to add value to agriculture. So when you start to add value to agriculture, then it moves beyond production. Then people start providing services to fine tune some of the products, to package some of the products. Then that's when your service sector start to grow. So yes, it's not strange to me to see that service sector is declining in Liberia because the government is focused on extraction at the moment to get revenue.
Yeah. So here's a I don't. So here's the difference between. I know you talk about the U.S. agriculture 200 years ago compared to Liberia. So the difference in time of Liberia and the U.S. is that 200 years ago, the U.S. was heavily investing in agriculture. That's why the output from there was more than the service sector, right? Compared to now. Even now, it is heavily subsidized, right?
Oh yes.
The agriculture sector in America is heavily subsidized because they're not just producing it for just American to consume, they produce it to send to other countries as well, right? But the difference in Liberia is that, eh, like you said, 500, what you said, $500 million over the last, what is it, 5 years or so,
Yeah.
right? So compared to the quantum of money we put in agriculture and compare that to what the US was doing, it is, minimum, like decimal numbers compared to that. So this, I think that explains why the output in US agriculture was higher. But in our case, most of our budget are invested in other sectors that are not agriculture. So this is why you see the sector, agriculture, the service sector is has a bigger employment, like the hotels, the restaurants, and there's not many people that have farms in Liberia, right? There's not many people that have farm jobs in Liberia, right? Now, if we were putting, let's say, even 20 or 30% of the budget towards that, like we could be on that same level where the majority of output in agriculture could, like you said, including the value could be coming from the agriculture sector. But that's the difference in the US. 200 years ago, 200 years ago, they were heavily investing in they still do up to now, but it just compared to what they're doing now, it's just different, so
Yeah.
um, so this is another uh comment from, and Dr. Pai was busy with us today. He said the best to ascertain the data generation by the best way to ascertain the data generated by the Britain, he called him the real name. The Bretton Woods Institution is to compel the officers of the bank to hold workshop on these reports and share the data with leading economists and other significant. This is brilliant. And other significant stakeholders. I absolutely agree with him on this, right? Like if you're putting out these data, you're supposed to be, but then again, it goes back to the people you have in, government. If they're not really demanding these things, the people will just do the bare minimum
Ah,
and get away with it, right?
that's the
So,
point.
right.
Who is
So,
having interest,
right. Right. But
in
it's a
doing
good
a
point.
deep dive
Right.
into some of these things? Who have the interest? And besides that, the report is public. When they produce this report, they don't hide it. The report is public. So you can go into the report and you have, inquiries. You can ask those hard questions. And I'm sure, at least from my experience, they will respond to you and you can engage them further.
Yeah. Jimmy, any thoughts on this?
I mean, you just hit it on the nail. That is the value. It comes down to value. We haven't properly assessed a lot of people the value of of education, professionalism. We don't really know. We see a trend where we think that we anyone can just do it. Well, it is superficial. If anyone is just doing it, it's I always use the doctor. I always use a doctor because it's glaring. Other professions are not as glaring as the medical profession. You got you have to conduct somebody needs surgery. Are you going to take anybody other than a doctor or a surgeon to perform that surgery? Are you going to take a dresser, somebody who puts bandage, or are you going to take even a nurse to do the surgery? You're going to take a doctor. Why are you taking a doctor? Because they know how to do the surgery. This should apply in all our institutions, all of them: EPA, Commerce, National Port Authority. We have to put expertise to work if we're going to get the most out of our place. And you see, the other advantage of putting expertise to work, we can train. It can train other people. They can learn, like the things we're talking about, is growing the value of these reports. If young people starting to understand, look, these reports are important. They inform our decision. They will get on board and start doing things differently. So it's so important that we look at every aspect of our institutions and our economy and decide that we're going to do this professionally. We're going to get at least one person there. He can teach everybody else how to do it. But we need definitely to do these things in a professional manner. That's when we get the most out of it.
Okay. All right. So we have another comment here from this is Emmanuel. Okay. He said data is very important for mechanized farming and specifically knowing the need of farmers and investors interested in agriculture development. Um, any thought, Ambulah?
Yeah, now, yes, in mechanized farming, like we said, for everything you need data. He put it right. The data is king. For everything you need to have some benchmark. You need to understand what the problem you're trying to solve, and you can't just be solving problem without knowing the problem. You need to take
Exactly.
time. You need to take time to know the problem, and to know the problem, it requires a whole lot of data, different kinds of data to do it. So mechanized farming, yes, even that mechanized farming, you need the data to understand. Beyond mechanized farming, even if you into processing of agricultural commodities, you need to understand what value you will get from it, and that has to do with financial related data. So you said it right. Data is king, whether for mechanized farming or even subsistence farming, where farmers are using hoes and cutlass. You still need data to understand how to improve that system towards mechanized farming.
Yeah. So we have another one here. This one I think is very. So this is from Dr. Paibo again. He said, based on the 4.8% growth rate, what are the I think you alluded to this, but maybe you can expand upon it. He said, what are the implications for the real sector? What is happening to enterprises and non-financial and non-profitable institution? Not, I think probably non-profit institution. How are these informing the policy rate by the Bank of Liberia, which is supposedly the central bank?
You
Uh,
see, the thing about the central bank part that I like in this thing is when you look at the act establishing the Liberia Bank for Development and Investment, it says the bank is established by the government to invest into agriculture. I think two other sectors they mean. But go and look at the investment portfolio of the LBDI and see how many money they have invested into agriculture over the years. Very insignificant.
yeah,
Very insignificant. So back to this report. If this report is supposed to be something to use, then policymakers now should come together and say, oh, okay, if the data is actually accurate, if just in 1 year, rice production and cassava production is contributing almost 50% of the growth in the economy, then why don't we invest more in rice and cassava production? Why don't we, from the central bank level, why don't we create incentive for these banks to loan to rice and cassava producers? Address some of the barriers that prevent them accessing finance and other resources from financial institutions. Can we now, as a bank, as a government, decide to introduce a lending program through the banking institutions that is patient capital, so that farmers are able to have it and invest over the period of time, that is less costly, that is structured around their production period for repayment? So these are the type of things the data should be informing. But you can't make those decisions definitively because you're not sure whether rice and cassava is actually impacting the economy to the extent reported by the bank. But if you convince yourself that, oh yes, they're really impacting the economy, then the central bank should be saying, okay, commercial banks, I look at your balance, I look at your financials, I look at your credit portfolio, I realize that agriculture is there contributing 2% of your credit portfolio. But yeah, we're seeing that agriculture is contributing up to almost 50% of the growth in the economy last year. So if we invest more in agriculture based on what we're seeing, we can double our growth numbers. Those are the type of decisions that come out of data. So yes, we can make those decisions now because we don't even trust the source of the data.
yeah.
That's why it comes back to saying, let's invest more into having accurate data so that we can make those informed decisions.
Yeah. First, I think I have a lot to say on this. First, what I always tell people, and I will stand by that until I see changes. The way banking is done in Liberia is outdated. It is not meant to support any country economy. It's not meant to support businesses. I think the way we do banking in Liberia is uh, now, to your point, it can be corrected by the central bank. As somebody who works in banking at a high level, right? It can be corrected by the central bank, but we don't do that, right? I think in the report that the World Bank puts out, they talk about non-performing loans, right, which went down from 22%, I think, to 16%, right? I always like to tell people that those things, like you said, it can be corrected by just good compliance from the monitoring from the central bank, right? But we don't have that. You know, we, as you said, if we want to improve agricultural financing, we can create some kind of scheme. The central bank can create some kind of scheme for the commercial bank to make sure that happens. Like you said, patient capital to invest in those. But nobody's thinking about that. Now, to the bank's point, they do have, every bank has their own board of director. They have their own risk appetite in terms of what sector they want to go in, what sector they don't want to go in, what market, region, county they want to go in, which one they want to stay away from. But we can create incentives from the central bank to say, hey, if you go into this area, you invest in this area, you look at this area, we will provide some kind of, you know, uh, some kind of incentives or risk mitigation to help you go into that and kind of reduce the risk that you're going to be taking in that. But none of that was seen on the from their end. So, to the point that you know Dr. Paibo is making, it should be something that the central bank is doing. Like as you rightly pointed out, if let's say we want to go into a specific sector and the banks are reluctant to lend to people in those areas, we have over here in the States, we have what we call the SBA. They guarantee sometimes from 75% up, sometimes up to 90%. All the bank has to do is underwrite that loan and they will guarantee 75 up to 90%. The only risk the bank is taking sometimes is 25% or 10%, right? All the risk is borne by the SBA, right? We can create some structure like that to take the burden off of those commercial banks. So let's say if they didn't want to go into Bond County because there was some stigma, or now it gives them the incentives to go there. But again, as I said, the way banking is done in Liberia is outdated, and the central bank is not doing anything significantly to change that, to make sure that these banks are performing to the way to meet the needs of the people in the country. So that's the my point on that. Jimmy.
One thing that businesses cry is access to capital. They say there's none, and there's several indications that the banks are risk averse. But importantly, I don't know if this is your colleague Ambulah, but Thomas Kane, yeah, he made a good comment there. You can put it up there, Gabriel.
Thomas Connet. I think this was one of the guys who wrote the paper. Right?
Yes, he did mention.
All right. So he said, "Thanks for the discussion, team. As was pointed out in the article, we need to invest in our institutions, get the right people with the requisite skills into those institutions in order to drive evidence-based policy making and implementation in our country." Well said.
That's it. If we are not going to listen, I am all for giving people jobs. I support it, but I don't want to give you a job and you just sit down all day and don't progress. You don't learn. That is not what you want. Okay, you want to make that person a professional eventually. And you don't have to necessarily go to 4 years of a higher institution. We have in-house engineers. We train people in-house, and they design the same complex structures as people who went to 4-year institutions.
Yeah.
because you will leave out some of the theoretical parts that you may
And
not
just
you
get to
have
the
to use
practical part.
to do the job, and just
Right.
get and concentrate on what is necessary to get the job done.
Yeah.
Um, and that is where we're going to make an impact. So all the time, we've hired a bunch of people on the payroll, but we must give them the requisite training so they will become more efficient for us. There's no need of just employing somebody for them to sit down all day and do nothing. You're frustrated. First of all, you're frustrating that person. You're not preparing them for the future. You're hurting the country because now you're wasting resources. Whereas that same person could have been very, very functional and very, very instrumental in advancing the country. So we got a lot of people on payroll. How much are we training these people to do the work that they need to do?
Yeah.
That is so important.
Yeah.
I think they call it capacity development,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm. And to your point, you're right. And this is why, I love this country. When I mean I love this country, the United States, we have a whole organization here called Europe. I don't know if you guys ever heard of it. Europe is pretty much, if you just come out of high school and you don't know what you want to do in your life, let's say college, where you want to go to college, you can take a year off. That's what they mean, right? You can take a year off to
Mhm.
explore, right? But what year up does, if you're taking that year out, they will say, hey, Ambulah, come to this program. You go there Monday through Friday. All you're doing is learning about banking, or you're learning about technology. They give you stipend for going to the program for learning. After that, they place you 6 months with, let's say, a bank. If you went to the program for bank, 6 months, they will put you into one of the top 10 banks in the country to learn for 6 months. Some people go into that program, they don't even go to college. They end up growing their way into. We take these people that come out of there, out of this program, like Jimmy was saying. Sometimes you take a group of kids that just came out of high school a year and put them into this program within 6 months. They're doing the same quality of work that you went to grad school have been doing. 6 months. 6 months. And this is somebody who has not gone to college. All they did was just take a year off. And what they do in addition to that, the banks will now take them and say, hey, we can now sponsor you while you're here working for, we can now sponsor you for you to go to college. Great program. It's any it's all over the country. Any part of the country you go, there's a year up program, right? I agree with you. The reason why I brought this up, because we made the same mistake. I don't like to get into policy, but we made the same mistake in the previous administration. We took people that just came out of colleges with degrees and put them in key positions with just theories in hand. It's okay to give people opportunity, but if you put people like that in position like that, you have to nurture them. Like Jimmy said, you have to nurture them, teach them just the hard skills that they need to do to get the job done. We didn't do that. That's why we're here. So I absolutely agree with you guys on that. Is just get the right people in place. They don't need they don't have to have the cream de la cream,
Mhm.
top-notch education. Just teach them the hard skill that they need to get the job done,
Right.
and someone who is willing to roll up their sleeve and work. That's another thing too. You don't just want to put people in position just for the title and they just sit around and do nothing. Put people in who are intentional about doing what they want to do. So I will
And
leave that.
here's the bigger danger,
All right.
and the bigger danger. If we are not preparing our youth to become professional, become functional,
Mhm.
what's going to happen to the country tomorrow?
It's perpetual cycle. Right.
It's we're going to have foreigners going to come and do these jobs because we can't do them. We never prepared our youth to do it. That's what's
Yep.
going to happen. It's already now. We already see when they start looking for certain engineers, certain professionals. They're looking for the foreigners.
Yeah.
We say the Liberian people. Organizations have come to Liberia and said, we need these amount of professionals, but you don't have them because
Yeah.
we're not preparing. We're not preparing our youth to do these jobs. Like I said, Formal education is beautiful, but sometimes you have to be practical
Hmm.
and you have to give them the skills they need to be functional. If instead of because we need them in the job market right away, we need them doing things right away. We don't have 4 years that much luxury to have them wait for 4 years, but we have to invest in them. We have to see the need because if we don't, Liberia will be taken over by foreigners tomorrow because we will not be able to do the jobs.
You're absolutely right. And gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, we have Ambulah, you have anything else to add to that before we?
Just I know we like 2 minutes to the end of the show, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So just to finally close. Thank you for the invite. Good conversation. We came up with the critique of the report with a specific goal in our mind. That goal is to begin to nurture the culture of not just accepting anything on face value, but to do a deep dive. Most importantly, the goal was to bring government attention and the World Bank and other partners who helping Liberia attention to the need to begin to invest heavily in data acquisition and management because we believe that if you're able to acquire data and manage it well, it will inform your decision on what policy to implement, it will inform your decision on how to manage and monitor the implementation and even how to evaluate and determine where corrections need to be made. In
Yep.
the absence of that, it becomes difficult. You're making decisions for the lives of people on guesswork. It's not
Hmm.
safe. Making decisions for the lives of 5 million people on guesswork. It's not appropriate. It's not tolerable. So we did this so that we can begin to put attention on data and how we can use data to inform decisions going forward. We acknowledge in the report the challenges that these institutions face in getting quality data real time to do some of the reports they're doing. But we also concluded that using forecast to announce growth figure is intolerable.
Mhm.
So going forward, we hope the government will see it in good faith and see reason to invest heavily in data, get the right people in the right place so that we can move our country forward.
Yeah. Again, thank you, Jimmy.
Yeah, we can't overemphasize that we have to be preparing people to take over. We have to be preparing them to be functional, to be professional. And there are many ways to doing this. And if we're not very smart to invest and to build capacity of our youth, of the people coming up, and we have a very large youth population, we they could drive Liberia to heights that we unknown.
Mhm.
But what are we doing to prepare them now to do those things? I I think preparing the youth now for work tomorrow should be the priority. Should be one of the priorities of the our government.
Yeah.
It is our responsibility to get our youth ready for to take over when we gone.
Yeah.
That's I'll leave it right there.
All right. Again, Ambulah, thank you for taking the time to join us here. We hope you don't become a stranger. We're here every Saturday. As I said earlier, we talk about everything business, finance, and economics. We will be back here tomorrow. I mean, next Saturday at 3 p.m. same time. And I think Jimmy said he informally invite you to next Saturday. So
Yeah.
hopefully we'll send you the link. But again, as I said, thank you for taking the time, and for your other colleagues that couldn't make it, hopefully they can join you next time. But again, thank you for sharing this article. Thank you for you guys being bold and countering an institution of that size to call them out on their data. And I think not that this is something we need to do to be that bold that if we see things like that being published that are inaccurate, we need people to be take the courage to be able to counter those kind of inaccurate data. So again, thank you guys for doing that, and we continue to look forward to seeing people like yourself and your colleague being um, taking on responsibility like that when what we thought the government is supposed to be doing, that the young people like yourself are actually doing. So again, thank you. And for me, I don't think I have anything else to say. I think you guys said everything we need to say that needed to be said in the closing here. So that brings us to the end of this discussion, and
Thank you.
we will see you next Saturday, same time, same place. And as we always like to say on here, we are all Liberians, whether you agree with what we said or not. Uh, that will forever remain the common denominator. So, on that note, see you next week. Ciao.
We are Liberians.